Okay, well, good afternoon. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today. I'm going to share my screen so that you all can see that. Just a second, I will do that. Go screen number 3, share. And so, well, let's see. I'm going to do something a little different here. Go. I just need to be able to see what's going on in the, there we go, that's what I was looking for. See, make sure that there we go. We've got some people in the waiting room, so I just wanted to make sure and let them in. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Barbie, can you see the screen?
Hold on, I think I did something on my end.
Yes, Luis, we can see the screen.
Okay.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank y'all. Okay, so let me double check. Yep, everything's good. All right, so welcome to this record book training, and appreciate those that were involved in kind of scheduling this. I always look forward to May, because this is the opportunity to get in front of folks that are really excited about what they've done all year and putting it all together in the forms of record books. So in most cases, I get to travel around the district and do this. This is a different time, but certainly a way for us to interact with each other and learn a little bit about record books in the process. So let's talk. Let me back up for just a second and say, I'm going to talk about two different topics, if you will, if you want to structure the presentation in two different pieces. One small piece is going to be on record keeping as a skill, as just an activity. And then we'll talk in greater depth about actual record books and the difference and why we talk about those a little bit differently. But I want to talk about record keeping first. The most important thing to remember about record keeping, it's that it's a function, it's a do. It is something that you physically do in some way, and we'll talk about some different strategies for that. It's something that we physically do throughout our lives in many different parts of our lives for different reasons. And it serves as a memory. It serves for us to go back and reflect back on something that we did. I think someone once said, and I don't know who to give credit for this quote, but says, we all have a perfect memory. We just have terrible filing systems in our brains. And so the idea that we can sit back 6 months from now and remember what we did 6 months ago, or even remember what we did 6 minutes ago, sometimes it's a little challenging. So record keeping serves as a memory. It serves as evidence of our activities. And some of you may say, well, I don't really keep any kind of records. And I would ask you, have you ever spent 2 or 3 minutes when you go to your phone, for example, you go to your photo album and you click on a photo, and then you kind of swipe left or right and you start looking at different photos and you start reminiscing about, oh, I remember that. That in itself is a form of record. And so it serves as evidence of something we did. Maybe it's that picture of us at the beach, or the picture of us together at an event, something like that. So it is evidence of our activity. And then, of course, as I alluded, it could be physical as well as electronic. I got to keep an eye on the participants, make sure I don't have to let anybody in. Okay, so I think we're all good. So, it can be written, physical meaning written down in some written record, and then electronic, obviously, phones, computers, files, things like that. The infamous cloud. Hopefully for us, it's a nice, billowy, fluffy cloud, not a rain cloud or a thunder cloud or a thunderstorm cloud or something like that. But why keep records of anything at all? Why is this even important? You look at those little words that you see on your screen there, and record keeping is managing and capturing and classifying and identifying and storing and tracking and securing and accessing. But why do any of those things? For what purpose? And, you know, I've shared 3 kind of real important things that we do here. We may not realize it, but, you know, most, if not all, businesses keep some form of record for their business. Sometimes they're financial records, sometimes they're personnel records, sometimes they're inventory records, sometimes they're sales records, sometimes there's record of expenses, all kinds of records that you keep in the form of business. And we don't do those things just because it has great entertainment value. Businesses do those to track where they've been, help them as they move forward. You know, if they're trying to reduce costs or increase revenue, that may be a valuable tool for them. We also keep records, health records. Every time you go to a doctor's office, they take your blood pressure and they take your temperature and they take your height, and God forbid they take your weight. You know, so you know, always got to turn away from the scale when they tell you to get up on the scale. But they have records, and they use those records to evaluate your health and your progress, where you've been, if you're trying to improve in some areas or you're trying to address some kind of health issues. Then they can look at those historically, and they can see where you've been, see where you are, and then maybe set some goals for you in terms of where you'd like to be. And then family records. And I said, well, what kind of family records do we keep? Well, I mentioned the photos as one example. Sometimes we keep family records of things that we've done. For example, maybe you have a baptism record, or you have a certificate of something that you've accomplished. We keep all kinds of records. I have my mother, of course we all have a mother. My mother is very big into genealogy. And so she has birth records, death records, marriage records, all kinds of records for all kinds of her family members dating all the way back to the 1500s. Now, I'm sure there's some entertainment value for her in that, but that's important to her, and she wants to be able to look back and share family history and so forth. So she keeps those kind of much more detailed records. So in terms of, you know, what are records and what kind of records we keep, we're involved in record keeping all the time. We just may not consciously think about it. And it's real important that we know that those serve a specific purpose. And so when we think about it in the 4-H program, and we look at, if I can get this thing, there we go. If I can get this thing switch, in terms of youth development, record keeping is a valuable skill. It's not just, I mentioned it's something you do, but it's something that you learn to do, and you can get better at it. So there's something that you can improve on. It helps us in terms of youth development. It helps young people set goals and work to achieve them. You know, they say, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been and where you need to be? And so it helps us set targets out in front of us, or in front of young people, so they can work towards those goals and work towards getting at least headed in that direction. We do something very, very popular in and I say popular, it's a phrase that we use in the 4-H program, where we implement this do, reflect, and apply approach. And so we encourage young people to do things. And not only do we encourage them to do things, then we ask them to look back and reflect on what they've done, perhaps what they've learned, something they did well, something they didn't do well, and then apply what they've learned from that in the future. And so it helps them set some new goals. So from a youth development perspective, it's a very important skill. I'll share this graphic with you. And this is the targeting life skills model. And for those of you, you know, that you can quickly look at the green section in the middle, you can see it's broken up into 4 quadrants: head, heart, hands, and health, much like the 4-H clover. And lo and behold, you say, well, look at it. And these are all skills that throughout the 4-H program, we work to provide some of these life skills to young people as they're involved in our program. So some are much more subtle than others, but if you look real carefully, right there in the head part is keeping records. So this is a vital part of people's involvement and young people's involvement in the 4-H program. It's a skill set that we hope to inspire and develop in them as they go through our program. And that's all the youth development side. Then we think about it from a practical side, saying, okay, well, that's great, but how does that help me or how does that help my 4-H member? And from a practical side, I have a senior in high school right now that is filling out, well, he's already been admitted to college, but spent his first part of his senior year filling out college admission applications. There are scholarship applications, all kinds of things last summer. And I'm just using him as an example. He got a job. Some jobs may require a resume, and that asks for information. So all of those things come into play in terms of the records serve as an easy way to reflect back. There we go again, reflecting back, and having evidence or realizing and remembering as a memory that we did these things or accomplished these things, and put those in something that will help us in the future. A recognition of accomplishments, awards. We have a lot of counties that use records to evaluate 4-H members' project experiences, among other things, and give awards based on that information. So if we have kept records on this, then it certainly will help us and help those 4-H members prepare and apply and get recognized for all the project work that they've done throughout the year, this year, or a culmination of 3, 4, 5, or maybe even 8 or 9 years in the 4-H program. So record keeping is an important part of the 4-H program, no doubt. So when we look at record keeping in 4-H specifically, what purpose and objectives are we trying to accomplish? It allows members to show growth and knowledge and creativity. And when we say growth, we're talking about growth in their development, not growth of necessarily the project. I think we hear sometimes that the growth, and I'm going to use, let's use a livestock project as an example. Let's just say that one 4-H member has a goat, a single goat. It's not an implication that in order for that 4-H member to have a fruitful goat experience, that over a period of time, that one goat needs to turn into 10 goats or 50 goats or 100 goats. That a 4-H member can grow in their knowledge and skills and still have just the one goat. So it's real important that we keep that in mind in terms of what we mean by growth. And then demonstrate their ability to keep and present written records. They have writing skills and all kinds of things that they experience in school, but certainly this is a way for them to augment that and to use some of the skills that they learn in school, writing skills, and put that in some kind of written record. It also helps over time. Mind you, if we're doing records and keeping records over time, to document our goals and our progress towards our goals. For example, let's say you're in track and you have a certain goal in mind in terms of how quickly you want to run the 100-yard dash. You want to rely, and if you're doing this on a regular basis, maybe your memory's pretty good, but you may have to keep some kind of record so that you know over time, and you can document, this is how I've been, when I'm at a meet, these are my times at my meets, boom, 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 boom. And you can document those goals and actions over time and your progress towards your overall goal and your fastest time, whatever that time needs to be, you can work towards that. Now, record keeping in 4-H also provides, for those of us that have that little competitive nature in us, it provides a competitive opportunity at different levels. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. So from a 4-H record keeping perspective, that's really the purpose and objectives. Let's talk about actually keeping records and what that means in terms of 4-H records. We talked about goal setting, and I think so that's pretty clear. So the second part of that is journaling. And I'm personally not the type of person, it's just not something I do, where I've got a little binder and I write journals. Some of you or many of you may be journal keepers, and that's an excellent form of record keeping. But some people may choose to use a calendar, and calendars, written calendars, can be a very valuable record keeping tool. And writing in those, not just writing dates of events, but writing information in there that's relevant to things that you've done, things that you've learned. And so a calendar is certainly a good way to do that. The index box, somebody said, what is an index box? Well, that's referring to index cards, and a lot of students still use index cards for studying strategies, where they put information on index cards and kind of sort them and shuffle them and review them and so forth. So the box is what that would go in. There are many people that it makes it easier just to jot something down on an index card. You have some kind of filing structure in the box, and you can keep records that way. Using a binder, a spiral, or a composition book or something like that, certainly another way. And then there's electronic methods as well. Google Forms, many of you may be familiar with Google Forms, which is great. I'll give you an example of how we use that. And, you know, this is just a type of record. When my son was working on getting his driver's license, the driving education requirements were such that he had to log so many hours, actually so many minutes, in different types of driving environments. And he had to keep a log of that, and he had to present that. So what we did was we went on Google Forms. We created a form that had all the metrics in there, the date, the time, the type of driving that he did, and, you know, just some notes section. And so every time he was driving, he would go in, and he had a bookmark on his phone. So when he would switch drivers and he was in the passenger side, or we'd get home or something, he'd tap on it, he'd enter the date, where he drove, how many minutes. And so when it was time to present that to the Department of Public Safety for his log, we just downloaded it all in an Excel file, and it was all there. So just one example of how you can use an electronic form or something like that. The other thing is social media is a great way. How many times have you found yourself zooming through photos and posts back and forth, reminiscing about some things? One of the things I've suggested as a possibility for those, you know, many young people have a phone with them. Many young people have social media accounts. And so one strategy you could effect is create a special hashtag for yourself. You're always taking those photos and submitting them so your friends can see. Create a special hashtag. So just down the road, when you need to gather that information, you can search based on that hashtag. And all of those posts that you did that were related to you going to this function or doing that or accomplishing this will come up with that hashtag. So just one example. And then if you want something more structured, there's plenty of mobile apps. And I'm not going to get into it a whole lot, but there is an online electronic record keeping system that was developed. It's new. It was developed for this new record book process called Z Suites, and we can certainly talk about that here later. But it's just in a nutshell the way it is. You create a profile. You can create individual people profiles within that one family profile, and you can keep records in that record book format electronically. Just keep in mind that for now, everything is a printed form, so it's not submitted electronically, but it keeps it electronically, and then you can print it, and it works out really well. And that among the other things that I'll share is on the state 4-H website, texas4-h.tmu.edu/recordbooks, and that you'll get all of that information plus more. So, at any rate, those are some different ways that you can keep track of those or keep those records. And then be able to reflect back and look and see what you've accomplished. So let me make sure. Yeah, I'm going to switch over just in case. Just something here. Just a minute. It's going to change my mugshot. There we go. And so that way my image and the shared screen are the same. Okay, so let's talk about 4-H records. Okay, and these are the kind of things that we ask for in 4-H records. We ask for goals. Now, I shouldn't have to say this, and this is probably, you know, makes common sense, but obviously you set goals in advance. So we're sitting here in May towards the tail end of the 4-H year. Hopefully at some time in July or August or even September, you or your 4-H members had set some goals, some personal goals that within the 4-H program sometime in that time, and then work towards that all year long. So goal setting, of course, is really important. We are asking you to keep records on knowledge and things that you've learned, skills that you've learned, your involvement and participation and providing leadership within the program are things we ask for records for. Awards and recognition of accomplishments. service learning, community service, and then of course photos and the written part, which is the stories. And you're going to see all this come together in the record book as we get through that. So those are the kind of things we ask for. There are 3 age divisions. So just so you know, that if you're a 3rd through 5th grader, that's a junior, and 6th to 8th is intermediate, and a 9th through 12th grade is a seniors. And some of you may be wondering, if you're saying, well, I just finished this week the 5th grade, and record books that I might be submitting, am I considered a 5th grader or am I a 6th grader? Because I'm already moved into the 6th grade. Well, the way it works is it goes from September to August. So if you're in 5th grade now, you'll be in 5th grade technically, as far as this particular part of our program, you're still considered a 5th grader, and you'll fall in that junior category. So just know that. I want to, if you don't remember anything today, just remember this right here, is that there are 4 parts to the record book, and these are the 4 parts right here. And so you're going to hear me make reference to these 4 parts over and over again. So this is a 4-part book. It's a check sheet, it's a personal information page, a 4-H story and photo portfolio, and then a report form. From a competitive, and that's just record books. From a competitive perspective, if you're wanting to enter a record book, to be in a competitive kind of activity, there are 25 award programs and categories that you can submit a record book in, which you see there on your screen in the white block. There's 25 there. There's a county evaluation, district evaluation, and then only the senior level ones go to state. And there's a state level evaluation. And there's a linkage between the state level winners and Texas Leadership Conference, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And as you look over to the right and you see these 25 categories, you may be thinking to yourself, well, I don't see my project listed anywhere in there. I like to do wildlife, but I don't see wildlife in there. If you're turning a record book in competitively, it's got to be turned in one of these 25 project areas. Each of you in your own county, there may be some requirements that you turn in a record book, but there may not necessarily be a requirement that it be in one of these 25 categories. You work that out with your county extension agent, make sure, have that conversation with them. But if you have wildlife and it's not listed here, so you could put that and would put that as a natural resource category, okay? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end of the presentation. Okay, so I put this graphic up a few years ago, about 4 years ago, and it actually got quite a bit of, I think by the time it all settled down, in less than 24 hours, it had 150,000 views. And so, you know, you say, wow, that's a lot. Well, I think a lot of people would relate to this photo that's ever done a record book. And sometimes it can be a bit stressful. And I will tell you that the record book is not stressful. It is what we do in terms of preparing the record book that puts us in a state of stress. But I think many of us may have found ourselves trying to finish a record book the day before it was due, and could relate to this young man's expression in terms of trying to get that record book done by tomorrow. Someone said, should we do a record book? How do I do a record book? When should I start a record book? Many years ago, I asked a friend of mine who was really, I'm not very good, was very good in, it was an arborist and a horticulturist by profession. And I said, what's the best time of year to plant a tree? And he looked at me and he says, right now. And I said, oh, okay, so the fall is the best time to plant a tree? He says, no, now is the best time to plant a tree. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, just plant it. So just don't worry about what time of the year it is. Just plant the tree. And so my analogy there, or that story is implied, when should we start a record book? Just start it. You know, should I do it? Just do it in whatever form or fashion it looks. And I'll tell you, once you get started, it will make it a lot easier as you progress. So just know that we don't want anybody to be in a state of stress when they're doing the record book. So let's talk a little bit about record books themselves, the actual record book, as opposed to just record keeping. And you're going to hear some similar things as we go through this in terms of purpose and objectives. You know, we want 4-H members to tell their story. We want them to tell us, you know, how they've grown personally from their experience and what they've learned. We want them to have and demonstrate their writing skills. And we certainly want to provide, the record books provides that opportunity for the competitive part of our program. So you see this over and over again. You see goal setting. We should be setting goals at the beginning of the year. We should be journaling. And journaling is just a generic term for us keeping the actual records, writing things down. That could be electronically, or it could be a physical journal, and then reflecting back and going back and, you know, what did we do? And you'll understand why we're talking about reflecting here in a little bit. Is saying, well, why do I need to reflect in my record book? And we'll get to that when we get to specific parts of the form. Okay, I don't want you to get too worked up on this graphic. This is just a summary. It's a 4-H record book summary. And I want to point out, I said I was going to mention this several times. There's 4 parts of the record book. There's the check sheet. There's the personal information page. There's the 4-H story and photo portfolio. And then there's the 4-H report form. Those are the 4 sections. That's all I really want you to focus. All of this is just the information that goes. And then you have 3 columns to the right of that. And those 3 columns, don't worry about everything below it just now, that's each age division, juniors, intermediates, and seniors. And this tells you within each age division for each of those 4 sections, some metrics or some things, limitations, how many years, how many pages that you can include in your record book for each one of those areas. So we'll go through that, but I don't worry about this too much. You can have access to that, and you can go over your individual age division by itself. So the first part of the record book. The first part of the record book is the check sheet. It's very simple, just your name, your county, your district, the age division, and then the category. This would be one of those 25 categories, okay? If your specific project is not listed, that's fine, but what needs to go here is a category. And so very simply, this goes at the very front of your record book. If you're going to turn record books in at the county level, you would come in and check off that box before you turn it in, saying, yep, I have my check sheet. Do I have my personal information page? Check, I got that. Do I have my 4-H story and photo portfolio? Yep, check that. Do I have my report form? Yes, check that. And then your initials go down here at the bottom. Then you turn it in. That's as simple as it gets. It's not real difficult. That goes in, that's the first part of your record book. Now, what is this worth from a competitive side? Right here. Absolutely no points. It's worth 0 points. But it's very important that that be in the front of your record book. It can slow down your processing of your book. It may require phone calls, and we didn't get the form, we didn't get, you didn't check off the box, you didn't initial, you didn't put the right category. So just take the time, fill it out correctly, and you've finished one part of the record book. It's really simple. Second part of the record book, part 2, is the personal information page, okay? It's a little bit more detailed, but it's just a form. You just fill it out with your name, some of the same information. You've got the category listed here again. Number of years in 4-H. Now you'll notice it says excluding Clover Kid years. So you can't include those activities you did as a Clover Kid, only as a 4-H member. And then the number of years in your main project. So if you're submitting a natural resources or a wildlife is your project, and you're submitting a natural resources record book, not how many years you were in 4-H, how many years were you in that project, in that main project area. Then your address, city, state, zip, date of birth, all of those things. The most important thing, aside from what I just mentioned above, is this right here. At the bottom of it, you have the 4-H member signature, the parent signature, and the county extension agent's signature. Now, you may not get the county extension agent's signature till you turn it in, so be sure and get the other 2, make sure those are signed. And again, how much is this worth? It's the second part of your book. It's worth 0 points. But if you don't get it filled out correctly, again, it could slow down your process for, the processing of your book, getting it submitted in the right category, in the groups, and getting it in front of the judges and all of that. So be sure to fill it out correctly, get the signatures, and get it turned in appropriately. So you've done two, effectively, we've covered two of the 4 parts of the record book. The next part is one of my favorite parts because this is where the 4-H member really gets the opportunity to express themselves. They get to do that in the form of writing, they get to do it in the form of creativity, they get to do it in the form of photos and pictures and design and all things like that. And that's the 4-H story and photo portfolio. So you've got a combination of telling your story and telling about yourself, talking about your family, your community, when and why you joined 4-H, your project goals, you know, what you hoped to accomplish, and maybe if you met those goals or exceeded them, how 4-H has helped you become better as a leader and as a member of your community. And real important, and this is probably one of the most valuable parts of the 4-H experience in my mind, is how has your involvement helped you set goals in terms of your career and your future? So that you want to include in there. And so there's some limitations, and we'll talk a little bit about, you know, what's in there and how that's structured. But these are the kind of things that you want included in there. One of the kind of the side notes that I always make sure and tell parents that are working with their kids, and I will tell you, this can and should be a family activity. This is not one of those things, here, go to your room, go do your record book. We encourage you to do this as a family and have these conversations and reflect back and record all of these things. But read the story and photo portfolio before they turn it in, because sometimes they can be, 4-H members can be a little too honest with their stories, and you may not want them to share all the gory details. So just be sure and read that before you submit it. But what's in it? Effectively, you've got should include some photos. It should include the written narrative part, your project work, any new information. You'll find it in the form that you may be kind of restricted to how much you can include and what you can say. Use the 4-H story to expand on things that you can't do in the rest of the form. Okay, and so you can use that as well, and then use captions. I would ask you all generally, just think to yourself. And I know that there's a few book bugs out there that love to read, but would you rather read War and Peace, this big book, thick book with nothing but tiny text, or would you rather read a magazine? And some might say, I'd rather read a newspaper or magazine. Why? Because it's structured differently. It's got columns, and so it's got pictures, or it's got graphics in there that kind of break up the text, and those graphics kind of tie into the text and help reinforce what I just read, or sets me up to say, ooh, what does this picture mean? And then I can read that. And so this is where the creativity comes in, and encourage people to really look at that and look at the design and how you put all those pieces together, and this is their chance to be creative, even in their writing style and talking about themselves. So it's really good piece. This is the third part of the record book. And so it's combined. Portfolio should be within the limits of the record book. And I shared the summary earlier. Remember, when I said, would you rather read War and Peace and would you rather read a magazine? Some people may want to read a book, but if you remember, we're talking about record books from a competitive standpoint. That means that there's a human being that is going to sit down and read multiple record books on the same subject over and over and over again, 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 record books. And so the intent is that this person's 4-H story and photo portfolio be memorable and unique and interesting to the person that's reading that, so that they can understand what this 4-H member's experience was. So don't use anything smaller than 10-point font as a good example. Why? The older people, and I'm including myself in that, anything smaller than 10-point font makes it hard to read. And you've got to remember that somebody's going to evaluate these books, and so they have to be read and they have to be done in a way that makes them attractive and easy to read. So don't use anything smaller than 10-point font. Make sure you pay attention to the page limits and the margins and things like that. And we used to allow those that were entering books in the photography to add 6 additional pages. We haven't done that since 2018. So for a couple of years, we've not done that. So no additional pages for the photography books. And folks, that's part 3 of the record book. So we've covered 3 parts: the check sheet, the personal information page, and the 4-H story and photo portfolio. Okay, so now we get to the report form itself. Now it's a form, just know that, but there's a lot of flexibility in there and a lot of differences as we kind of go through this. You'll see it's the same form for all the age divisions. It asks for the same information of all the age divisions, but the number of entries and the number of pages or the amount of space that you're allotted for each age division is different. It's in that summary form that I shared with you earlier. And it's depending on the age division, it's the current year and up to 3 preceding years in your experience. So even though we talked about being a 4-H member for 8 or 9 years, there's some limitations there in terms of what you can include. So let's get right in it. Section 1 is your 4-H project experiences. What is your project? How did your project change or grow over time? Okay, and you can look in the green box there. It tells you your page limits, and it tells you that if you're a senior, you can have up to 4 pages, intermediates 3, and juniors 2. So you've got to be able to answer all these questions and put all this information within those page limits. You can include learning experiences. This is real important. You can include learning experiences gained in other youth or community organizations as long as they're applicable to your 4-H project. And I'll give you an example. I live in a small community, and I enjoy photography. And so very possibly photography is my project, and I really enjoy that, but there's not a whole lot of 4-H members in my club that like to do that, but there's a local photography club. So I join that, and I periodically go with them, and we meet, and we go and photo shoots, and we go over to the wildlife refuge, and we take wildlife photos, and then we go to the park and take photos of people and things like that. Even though I'm participating with another organization, because that directly supports my photography project, I can include those kind of experiences in my 4-H project experiences section 1 of my report form. The individual directed project learning experiences, what that's referencing is not every experience you have in the program must be as part of a group. You can certainly go and have an experience just by yourself. And I used this example the other day. Let's say you want to get involved in ag product ID, for example. And so you really want to practice or you want to learn more. So you go to the grocery store and you walk up and down the produce aisle, identifying the different fruits and vegetables that you see on the counter. That's an individually directed project learning experience. There was nobody else there, but it certainly supports your 4-H project experiences. So don't exclude those. Know that you can include in this section 4 projects, up to 4 projects. The very first one you'll list is the one that you're submitting that record book category. So if you're submitting a photography record book, the first project you should list should be photography, and then the current year, and then the 3 preceding project experiences for that project below. And then you can list up to 3 other projects below that. Okay, let's see. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Barbie, I'm going to count on you. If I miss something in the chat, text chat or something, just interrupt me.
Okay, Louis, I did have a question,
Okay.
and I'll ask it over the mic instead. Because you're talking about the projects and how many and that kind of stuff here. We've got a lot of, or quite a few new people on.
Okay.
Would you backtrack, or would you just, like you said before, start from here? Start this year and move forward instead of going extra years?
You know what? That's a good question, and I get that quite often. And I'm going to go back to the analogy. It's going to be a 2-part response. I'm going to go back to the analogy of planting the tree. But before, so I would just say, just do it. And so the answer, do I go backtrack? Just start. If you want to be competitive, if your goal is to be competitive, then yes, I would suggest you're going to be much more competitive in that category if you backtrack and try to go back and capture what you did last year and the year before and the year before. Okay, so that the answer is not the same for everybody that may ask that question. That's why I was I'm not trying to be vague. I'm just trying to say, if your goal is to just start a record book, then just start it and start now. If you're a, third grader or fourth grader, and you really just want to get started with record books, then just start. Don't worry about the previous year. If you're a third or fourth grader and you want to start record books, but you want to be competitive, you want to submit that record book for recognition, and you want to be the best photography book in there, then yes, backtrack. So I hope that answers. It's not, depends on what your motive is in terms of records and record books. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. Because we just, in my opinion, we just want to get them started kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So I always kind of promote the same thing, just get started on them.
Yeah, just plant the tree. Just start now and dig the hole in terms of, getting that tree planted. So a great question. Great question.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's talk about we're done with section 1. Section 1, let's go back, is your 4-H project experiences, the things that you've done and how that project has changed or grown. Second section is leadership. Okay, your leadership activities include, and this is, if you'll notice, it's a table. It's not a narrative. So in the table, you include the year, the leadership activity, the role, the level, and then your responsibilities, duties, and accomplishments. Okay, and so it's like, well, that's a lot of information to put in the table, and you're right. You can go in there and list what you did to help others through 4-H this year, including things like club officer, if you were on county council, if you were on a county committee. There are many of you that are involved in a whole host of different ambassador programs. If you were involved in some ambassador program, you certainly might want to include that as well. And you can go into the current year as well as 3 previous years. Unless you're a junior, you can only go 2. But one of the things I'll point out, the year is pretty cut and dry, the leadership activity, and this applies to anything in your record book. Now you may choose to, since you've got more space, if you will, in your 4-H story and photo portfolio, I really discourage people from using acronyms like, pause. Now I can assume what pause means. That, animals have paws. Maybe it's a pet thing. Maybe it's a this. Remember, from a competitive standpoint, that reader may not have any idea, even though everybody, and I'll use, since Barbie was on, everybody in Jim Wells County may know that acronym. But if this is a book that's being judged or evaluated by somebody that's not from that area, they may not have a clue what that acronym means. So don't use acronyms. You may not even use the name of the organization if you don't have to. If you want to just put in here, we did this for the food bank, for example, not some acronym that everybody understands to be the food bank in that physical region. So keep that in mind. And then the duties and responsibilities and accomplishments is really important. On a junior, you're going to get remember, this is a table. You'll get 10 entries and a maximum of 1 page. Intermediates is 15 entries and 2 pages, and seniors is 25 entries and 3 pages. So I'm going to use this as an example that applies to all 3 in terms of the limits. If I'm a junior or I'm an intermediate, let's say I'm an intermediate, and I have 15 entries, but by the time I put the 15th entry, it pushes to the 3rd page. My limit is 15 and 2. So I either have to be more concise with some of my entries, or I may have to only put 14 because I can't be concise and I only have room for up to 15 and up to 2 pages. Okay, so know that. Now, I said I was going to go back when we talk about reflecting and thinking back and how that ties into record keeping. You say, well, I'm limited to 10, but I've done an excellent job of keeping records. And over the last 3 years, I have like 40 different leadership experiences I want to put in there. This is what helps you go back. When you keep good records, you can go back and reflect and then begin to pick out of those 40 the 10 most significant leadership experiences that you want to include in your book that support your involvement in that category, okay? So if you're just doing record books for the sake of doing record books and keeping records, just get it in there. For those of you on the competitive side, you can begin to be very picky about which ones you want to include in there if you've got more than the allowed number of entries and space, okay? Very simple. So that's section 2. As we move over to section 3 is community service. It's also in table format. You'll have to put the year, your role, and in this case, you say, what do you mean by your role? Well, generally there's 3 types of roles. You put a Y for yourself, meaning this was a community service activity you did by yourself. P would means you provided primary leadership, and so that means you picked up the phone, you called some friends, fellow 4-H members, y'all got together, but you were kind of the instigator and the leader of that, so you would put a P. And the M for member of a group was you're the one that received the call saying, hey, we're getting together to put together, to sew a bunch of masks, face masks. Would you be willing to be part of our group? And you say yes, and you do that, and you're one of a member of a group, okay? So just know that that's what your role in that would be. And in my mind, what is the service activity? And I say, don't use acronyms because a lot of people don't know what they are. I mean, they know what acronyms are, but they may not know your specific acronym. And if you're limited on space, well, then that may not help you. But this is, to me, the most important. That's going to be the most impactful. The year, how could I get excited about the year? Except that I might see that you did it for 2 or 3 or 4 years. Your role, certainly I can do that, but that you tell in one letter. Whether it was you did it yourself, a Y, a P, or an M, okay? The service activity is knowing just what you were doing. And for me, the most important thing is, how was that impactful to you or the people that you serve? And so how can you express that as concisely, using action words and things like that that allow the reader to really gain a good appreciation for the level of impact that activity had. So real important on 4-H community service activities. Repairs, collections, care packets. I mentioned constructing face coverings or face masks or whatever in our current situation. Whatever that activity is, certainly worthy of inclusion within the limits. And you've got those limits as well. Okay, section 4. Section 4 is other 4-H projects. You say, well, what do you mean other 4-H projects? Well, section 1 allowed you to put your main project plus 3 additional for a total of 4 projects. And so in section 1, you can put 4 projects. If you had more than 4, you could put the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th project in this section within the limits that you see here. So you could include 3 previous years unless you're a junior, 2 years. You can put any number of projects, and then there's the page limitations, 1 page for juniors and 2 pages for intermediates and seniors. And the reason you see this little yellow asterisk is if you did a record book last year, that changed. So just know, if you're using current year's information, just follow the instructions and you're good. If you did one last year, just know that this changed and use the current information, the current limits. But as it relates to 4-H projects, the other thing I want to point out, if you're just doing a record book and you only have 3 projects, fine. If you're doing this just for record keeping, no problem. If you're doing this for a competitive purpose, remember that this section has a point value. And so if you only have 4 projects and you put all 4 of them in section 1 and you leave this section blank, you're going to get 0 points in this section, okay? And you don't want that. And we're going to talk about the points in a minute. So what you may choose to do is move one of those 4 that's in section 1 over to this section so that you don't lose the points in this section. I'm going to give you, when we get to the points deal, I'll give you another strategy that you may consider that may help you in this respect as well. Okay, so that takes us to section 5. Again, it's another table, the year, the level, and the level of your award, local, county, district, state, national. The recognition itself, what was it? And for me, this is the most important part. Why was this important to you? Don't get caught up. I'm not trying to minimize the value of grand champions and first places and all of those things. but don't get hung up that it has to be a ribbon or a trophy or a plaque. People get recognition in many different ways. And as long as you can demonstrate the value that recognition was to you personally, then that's more important than the recognition itself. Recognition can come in the form of being asked by someone in the community to be part of a local community group, to be an officer, to be a committee chair, all of those things. So you decide within that table and within the limits, however many entries, 10 for juniors, and this is pretty consistent among all those in the tables, 15 for intermediates and 25 for seniors. You choose which ones are most valued. If I'm looking, I'm just telling you from a competitive standpoint, if I see 10 entries in there and I see Grand Champion Rabbit, 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 that's fantastic. But in those 5, 6, 7, 8 entries, I don't see any growth. I don't see anything that demonstrates something was gained, okay? And so the importance to you, that part of the table is critically important, okay? So that's 4-H recognition and awards, and that's why it's not 4-H awards. It's 4-H recognition and awards. All right, section 6, and we're almost to the end here. Section 6 is non-4-H activities. So if you're involved in extracurricular activities at school, band or track or some other athletic or the chess club or student council or something like that, or you're involved in some other community organization, maybe you're part of a local charity group, a food bank I mentioned earlier, and you do that on a regular basis as part of an organization, church groups or some other religious organization. All of that information you can include in this section. Non-4-H activities, and you have a limit of 1 page. You can include the current year, and then if you're an intermediate or senior, 3 previous years, or if you're a junior, the 2 previous years. Really simple. If you're a member of the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts or something like that, you can put all this and get credit for it in this section. And so it's pretty cut and dry in terms of what you can include in here. And after I get done with this section, I'm going to talk a little bit about formatting. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, section 7. Section 7 is college and career exploration. And so the most important thing is no one's holding anyone's feet to the fire. And I mentioned this before. I think one of the most valuable things people can do in the 4-H program when they explore different projects is learn what they want to do when they get older, or just as important in my mind is to learn that something they thought they wanted to do, they certainly know that they do not want to do as a career. We learn things every day, and so sometimes we learn that something we thought was fun may not be fun at all. You may have wanted to be a veterinarian your whole life, and then you got into the vet science project, and every time someone pulled out a syringe with a needle, you pass out, and that wasn't something that you could get over. Well, you know, you may realize, you know what, being a veterinarian may not be the thing for me. So those are valuable experiences. But as of today, you could choose a career. What would you choose? And so you want to list in there, and this is also in a table format. What are those activities that helped you learn about your careers? What are those activities that you did? Did you do interviews, tours? Did you do any job shadowing, any mentoring, work experience, skill development, coursework, any of those things? I share this experience because people assume we all have different resources. Families have different level of access to resources. And I ran into somebody I hadn't seen in probably 25, 30 years. And we were talking, and we were classmates in high school, and we you know, what do you do and what do I do? And so we got, well, I travel a lot. Oh, really? And I travel too. And so we got to talking, and she said, you know, I said, well, where do you go? When you travel? She said, oh, I go all over the world. I'll go to France. I've been to Spain. I've been to, and she goes through all of these countries. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I just chose the wrong profession. I don't know how she manages to travel all these places. We talked a little bit more. And as we talked, I realized she did not physically go to these places. And she wasn't being deceitful about it, because she shared. She says, oh no, she says, I plan a trip, and she goes through Google Earth and she literally walks down these streets and plans this whole vacation, if you will, and window shops and goes down and experiences, and then goes and researches the food and orders food online that's from that region, and just an amazing experience. So don't assume that because you can't visit a college campus doesn't mean you can't do a virtual tour of that campus. You can't do virtual experiences of careers, and however you may do that. And I'm not sharing that because of the environment that we're in now. This has been true for years. There's lots of opportunities for you to experience college and career without physically doing the most obvious things, which you see listed there is job shadowing and things like that. Not everybody gets those opportunities, but doesn't mean you can't have those experiences. So this is section 7. Again, it's a table, and you see the 10 entries, the 15 entries for the intermediates, and the 15 entries for the seniors. Okay, and so those are the 7 sections of the record book. Okay, so the books are submitted for evaluation, and then we have the judges look at them. And so my question is, what, or the question you're asked, what do the judges look for? Let me back up, and I want to pair something with, as we get into the evaluation, I want to pair something that I referenced early on, in that when we structure our 4-H story and portfolio, that it'd be attractive and so forth. From a record books where you just want to start, just get it in there. From a competitive side, what you want to do is structure it in a way that's easy to read, because there's going to be someone that's going to sit there and read it. A lot of people like to use bullet form and very concise, not even complete sentences. It's not a narrative. If you're just starting, just do it however you want. As you get better at it and you begin to be reflect back and say, well, I only got this amount of space. What do I want to include? I want to include this, but not this. And you can put that in bullet form or in a structured way where it starts with the most important stuff, the most current stuff, and then it works down from there. So this year, then below that would be the previous year, and below that the previous year, and so forth. So you're going to have to work on the formatting, but it will impact how the book is read. And so just know that. I'm going to go back to the 4 parts of the record book. Part 1 was a check sheet, 0 points. Part 2 was the personal information page, done, 0 points. Then you have the other 2 parts of the record book, which is your story and photo portfolio, and sections 1 through 7 of the report form. The 4-H story and photo portfolio is worth 30 points, and everything else is worth 70. Now, another reference to something I mentioned earlier. I mentioned in section 1, you could have up to 4 projects, and then there was the other 4-H projects, which is section 4, where you'd have your 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th project. And I said, well, if you only have 4, take 1 out of section 1 and move it and put it in section 4 so that you don't lose those 5 points. That's a judgment call that you have to make. But the other tip I want to share with you is a lot of people are involved in specific projects that they don't give themselves credit for. One is leadership in itself can be a project. Community service by itself can be a project. Now, you don't want to duplicate the information in your book. If you've already put information in one, you don't want to put in the other. But you can have I'll give you an example. You can have a leadership role in a community service project and not duplicate that information. So you can be a member of a community service project, group activity, and be asked to lead a component of that. So that becomes part of your leadership. And so the actual service project is something that you share, but your leadership in that. And I was the phone tree person. I got on the phone, I called everybody, I scheduled this, I called up the facility that we were going to go do the event at, all of those things. Don't duplicate the information, but there's multiple experiences within one that you can kind of share. So use that. The other thing, and I strongly encourage you, because I think it's one of the best projects that you can use with just about any project, is if you don't do it, try photography. You can incorporate photography in just about any project. And if you don't have a nice camera, it doesn't matter. Use your phone, but you can learn some very basic photography skills with your phone camera. And so that's the metrics. That's what the scorecard looks like. You can review it on your own. It's broken down by sections, and it shows some metrics within each of those sections what they're looking for, so you can look to the scorecard to go back to your form and improve your entries in your form to fit these different sections. Okay, that's it. That's the record book. The record book covers that we see all the time, very simple. There is no standard. There was, so you see the green record books that you saw on the initial graphic, but all types of covers or binders are accepted. It can be as simple as the pocket folder with the little brads that you see at the store. You can get the official green, which is a really thick kind of a cardboard, really rigid book. It's really nice. And they're not real expensive. I think they're $2 or $3, $4 each. And it's very possible. You can get those at the 4-H supply, or it's shop4h.org. You can get them there. But check with your county extension office. They may have purchased 10, 15, 20 that they just keep handy in the office and sell, you know, right out of the office. So keep that in mind. However you bind the book is fine. Okay, no problem. So we'll cover some other general guidelines. Handwriting is okay, but remember, what's your objective? If your objective is to get a record book done, handwriting. If your objective is to be competitive, handwriting's okay, but remember, someone's got to read that. And if handwriting is hard to read, it's going to make the person evaluating that book struggle to get to the meat of of what you're trying to convey through that, if there's an issue. Grammar and punctuation are really important. The grammar police will be out, I will assure you. So don't use text messaging lingo in your record book. Follow the margins. There are some margin guidelines. Paper is just use regular white paper, or you can use bond paper. Don't use construction paper, even though it's nice and colorful. You fold construction paper 2 or 3 times and then it just cracks and breaks off, and that's why. Be creative, and that's recognized. It's not necessarily a metric in the scorecard, but it certainly allows the reader to learn a lot more about the 4-H member and what they're trying to demonstrate or show in their record book. And then follow the fonts. Don't use crazy fonts. Use fonts that are easy to read. If crazy fonts look cool in a 4-letter title, not in a lot of text. The eyes, you got to remember, eyes have to adjust and read this quickly. So use standard fonts that are easy to read. Okay, just to kind of follow up, photography books. If you're submitting a book in photography, no more photos. Don't add the additional 6 pages. If you're used to the old record book system that allowed use the old forms, don't include any of those in your record book. Just the current forms. And we have our updated categories that we talked about. And here's the 25. I showed them to you earlier. These are the 25 categories that you can submit a record book in. Okay. All right. Last but not least, seniors. Remember, if your book is judged at county and it advances to district, it'll be judged at district, and that's juniors, intermediates, and seniors. Only the seniors advance to state, so those books will go on and be judged against records books from all over the state, from each of the 12 districts. So if you do the math, you'll know that the hardest competition will be 11 other books other than yours if you're a senior and you go to state. So you're effectively competing for against 11 other maximum participants. Years ago, when they updated the categories, I think there was one category that only had 2 books in it statewide. So, you know, not saying that those were easy books to beat. They were not, but they were very specialized, and so they've made some changes to reflect that. But if you win that state category and you want to submit a record book in that same category the following year, knock yourself out. That rule's changed and you can go. If you win the state record book category, it makes you eligible to participate in Texas 4-H Leadership Conference, which is typically in Washington, D.C. The cost ranges from $1,250 to $1,500, depending on, you know, the arrangements they make. But you leave Thanksgiving Day and you come back, I think Monday or Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday of the coming week. Maybe that's Monday night or something. But it's a really cool trip, and they really enjoy it. So that's not everybody can go. Only those 25 kids that win those senior level record books go. So the maximum number of 4-H members that go will be 25. So it's a small, intimate group. Okay. That's it. Those are the record books. I strongly encourage you to dig the hole, plant the tree now. Just start. If you've never done a record book, don't make it difficult. Don't stress over it. Just get started on it, and fill it in. You can fine tune it as time goes by, but what you don't want to do is find yourself in the position where it's due in 2 days. You haven't really worked on it, and this is where you're at. Okay. Because when it's stressful, then no one enjoys it. And so this is a really, like I said earlier, very early on, this is a skill that we're trying to develop in young people that they'll use their whole lives. So if there are any questions, I'd love to answer them at this point.
Louis,
Yes.
both Kleberg-Kenedy and Jim Wells County record books are due on Monday, June 22nd.
Okay.
And we're normally due about state roundup time, so they have plenty of time since we won't be doing state roundup this year.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, that's good to know. Good to know. And so they've got a little time, and that's good. And like I said, just dig the hole. Just plant the tree. Just start. And you'll find that you'll have a really good experience. And then over time, you'll have a wealth of information that you will not stress over. You know, when people say, oh, we've got to fill out all these applications and these scholarships and these essays and all that, and you just whip out that record book and there it is. It's all there in one place.
On the flyer that we sent out, I had both Paula Giebert and Amy Gallagher send me a quote on record books and the importance they saw as they had seniors graduating and working on scholarships. So that was those two quotes that were on that flyer. So they are important to keep throughout the years.
Excellent.
I'll also share on our 4-H Facebook page, we have lots of pictures that I've uploaded through events throughout the year. 4-H parents are welcome to take those pictures, copy those pictures, download them to include in your 4-H story. So by all means, if you weren't in the habit yet of taking pictures as we've had 4-H events, activities, or the kids have been involved in things, by all means, go ahead and use those pictures that are there.
Good thought. And believe it or not, if you don't have a good photo, I'm telling you, go troll your close friends or your 4-H family's Facebook pages, and you'll find some photos in there of things that y'all were doing together, and just ask if you can use their photos, and you should be good. But things have changed a lot. There's a lot of cameras out now, a lot more cameras available now than there were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So lots of photos out there. Take advantage of. Well, I appreciate the invite, and just know that if you think you missed something, go to our district Facebook page, and there's a live video that we did on Tuesday night that's basically the same thing. If you want to go back and listen to a section, you feel free to do that. And I hope you all have a great evening. Stay safe, and good luck with your record books. If you need any information, contact your county extension agents first, and I'll work with them to help you get any information that you need to get. Go to texas4-h.tamu.edu/record books, and you can access all the forms and all the resources to help you put your record book together.
Thank you, Louis, for sharing that information with us. Anyone on that, as you have questions, please give Frank or I a call, email us, whichever. We'll be glad to help you along with the process. I know record books can be unfun a lot of the times, but it is important, and so we will help you all along the way. We've got plenty of time between now and when record books are due, and it's just about starting. So thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank you all very much. Y'all have a great evening.
Thank you, Louis.
Thanks, Louise.
Thank you.
Adios.